The grandfather clock chimed midnight. Its resonating clang severed the quiet of the old house, each strike echoing like a mournful dirge. Outside, the wind howled, whipping against the windows like a restless spirit. Rain lashed down, a relentless torrent against the glass. I sat by the fireplace, the dying embers casting flickering shadows that danced across the room. A chill permeated the air, seeping into my bones despite the crackling fire. The book in my hand lay forgotten, the words blurring into meaningless lines. A sense of unease had settled upon me, a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The house, usually a sanctuary of warmth and comfort, felt different tonight, as if an unseen presence had slipped through its aged walls. Grandfather, the thought of him brought a bittersweet ache to my heart. He had passed away a year ago, leaving this house, his sanctuary, to me. We were kindred spirits, sharing a love for books, history, and the quiet solace of this old house. He had taught me to appreciate its creaking floorboards and whispered stories hidden within its walls. He used to tell me stories about the house, tales passed down through generations, stories of love and loss, joy and sorrow, all woven into the very fabric of this place. But there was one story he never finished, a tale about a hidden danger, a warning from the past. He had dismissed it as an old wives' tale, a whimsical fancy. But tonight, with the wind howling like a banshee and the shadows dancing in the firelight, the memory of his unfinished story sent a shiver down my spine. A noise, soft and almost imperceptible, drew my attention towards the hallway. It was a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once, echoing through the silence like a whisper carried on the wind. It was a creak, the sound of a footstep on the old wooden floor. Each step seemed to resonate with an eerie familiarity, as if the house itself was alive and breathing. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat against my ribs. The rhythm was relentless, a constant reminder of the fear that gripped me. My eyes strained in the darkness, trying to pierce the veil of shadows that clung to the corners of the room. Every shadow seemed to move, to shift, as if hiding something just out of sight. And then I saw him. A figure emerging from the shadows, almost blending into the darkness itself. Standing at the entrance of the hallway, shrouded in shadows, was a figure. It was as if the darkness had taken form, standing there, watching. Tall and gaunt, it stood motionless, its features obscured by the darkness. The air around it seemed to grow colder, more oppressive. A cold dread gripped me, icy fingers squeezing the air from my lungs. I could feel the fear spreading, paralyzing me. The figure remained still, yet I felt its gaze upon me, heavy and unwavering. It was as if it could see right through me into the depths of my soul. My mind, desperate for a rational explanation, grasped at straws. Could it be a trick of the light? A figment of my imagination? A trick of the light, I told myself. A figment of my overactive imagination. But the figure remained, unmoving, unyielding. But deep down, a primal instinct whispered a terrifying truth. This was no illusion, no mere shadow. This was no ordinary shadow. This was something else, something that defied explanation, something that brought with it a sense of impending doom. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, the figure began to solidify, its features resolving into a horrifying familiarity. It was my grandfather, yet it wasn't. His face, etched with a lifetime of experiences, now bore an expression of stark terror, his eyes wide with unspeakable fear. His voice, when he spoke, was a hollow rasp, a chilling echo from beyond the grave. "Beware!" he whispered, his voice a mournful sigh that cut through the silence like a shard of ice. "The shadow is coming. It seeks what is hidden, what is rightfully theirs." The warning hung in the air, heavy with dread and urgency. My grandfather, or the apparition that bore his likeness, continued, his voice laced with a desperate plea. "You must leave this place," he urged, his spectral hand reaching out towards me. "Leave and never return." Section 5. A Cold Fear. A cold fear, unlike anything I had ever experienced, washed over me. It was as if the very essence of dread had seeped into my bones, chilling me to the core. My blood ran cold, my body frozen in place by a terror so profound it felt like a physical force. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a drum. The fire crackled, a lone sound in the deafening silence that followed my grandfather's spectral warning. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the room feel even more ominous. The spectral image of my grandfather began to fade, his form dissolving back into the shadows from whence it came. His eyes, filled with a sorrowful warning, lingered in my mind. "Remember my warning?" His voice echoed, a whisper fading into the howling wind outside. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with foreboding. Then he was gone, vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind only a chilling silence. The room felt emptier, as if the very air had been sucked out. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my mind reeling from the encounter. Questions swirled in my head, each one more unsettling than the last. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and pulse with a life of their own. The room grew colder, the warmth of the fire fading away. The grandfather clock chimed one, each clang a jarring reminder of the ghostly visitation I had just witnessed. The sound reverberated through the room, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped me moments before. The following morning the events of the night pressed upon me, a suffocating weight on my chest. The rational part of me tried to dismiss it as a nightmare, a figment of a sleep-deprived mind. But the chilling clarity of the encounter, the terror in my grandfather's spectral eyes lingered. Driven by a need for answers, I began to search the house, scouring my grandfather's belongings for any clue, any hint of what he meant by the shadow and this hidden danger. Days turned into weeks, my search leading me down a rabbit hole of cryptic notes, old journals, and local legends. Each piece of the puzzle only deepened the mystery, painting a picture of a centuries-old secret tied to my family and this house. The weight of the unknown pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket of fear and uncertainty. Desperate for answers, I sought out the town's oldest resident, a wizened librarian rumoured to possess an encyclopedic knowledge of local law. Her name was Mrs. Hawthorne, and she lived in a tiny cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by books and the faint scent of lavender. She listened intently as I recounted my experience, her piercing blue eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she sighed, her gaze distant, as if peering into the past. "The shadow," she murmured, her voice a low rasp. "It's not a legend, child, it's a curse." She spoke of an ancient entity, a being of pure darkness drawn to places of power and fueled by secrets. It was said to prey on those who unknowingly held the key to its release, their fear, its nourishment, their despair, its triumph. Mrs. Hawthorne's words confirmed my worst fears. The shadow was real, and it was coming for me. The weight of my grandfather's warning settled upon me with renewed force. I had to find a way to stop it, to protect myself and this house from the encroaching darkness. But how do you fight a being of pure shadow, an entity fueled by fear itself? Mrs. Hawthorne had given me a glimmer of hope, a cryptic riddle hinting at a way to banish the shadow, to send it back into the abyss from whence it came. The riddle spoke of a forgotten ritual, a sacrifice of truth and a symbol of protection to be performed under the next blood moon. Time, it seemed, was running out. The blood moon, a rare celestial event, was merely a week away. The next few days were a blur of frantic research and preparation. Every waking moment was consumed by the urgency of the task at hand, the weight of the impending deadline pressing down on me. I delved deeper into my grandfather's notes, deciphering cryptic symbols and ancient texts, piecing together the forgotten ritual. Each discovery brought a mix of hope and dread, As the enormity of what lay ahead became clearer, the pressure was immense, the fear a constant companion. Every tick of the clock echoed in my mind, a relentless reminder of the limited time I had left. The night of the blood moon arrived, casting an eerie crimson glow upon the land. It was a sight both beautiful and terrifying, a harbinger of the events to come. The air crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that sent shivers down my spine. It felt as though the very atmosphere was alive, charged with anticipation. I stood in the heart of the house, surrounded by the objects required for the ritual, my heart pounding against my ribs. Each item had been meticulously placed, each symbol carefully drawn. The shadow's presence loomed, a suffocating darkness pressing in from all sides. It was as if the very walls were closing in, the air growing thicker with each passing second. It whispered to me, tempting me with promises of power and oblivion if I only surrendered. The voice was seductive, almost comforting, but I knew it was a lie. But I stood my ground, fear giving way to a steely resolve. I had prepared for this moment, and I would not falter now. I had come too far to give up now. Every ounce of my being was focused on the task, every fibre of my body straining against the encroaching darkness. The fate of my family, the future of this house, rested on my shoulders. Their faces flashed before my eyes, giving me the strength to push forward. It was time to face the shadow. The final confrontation was at hand, and I was ready to fight for everything I held dear.